called meeting for April 6, 2021 of the Bristol, Virginia City Council. Would you please join me in a moment of silent prayer? Would you stand with me and join in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Appreciate those that came out tonight and those that are watching on the YouTube stream. A couple of things before we only have one item on the agenda, but just a couple of reminders as we get into the budget here over the next few meetings. Remind people, not as much tonight, but particularly in the coming meetings, that we do want comments from the public. And we encourage that. People can sign up. When they do, we sign up in the back. We are, as we always do, limit people to 3 minutes, and we really need to be strict about that. Keep to that. So the people that are here, and I'll mention this again, but as you see the lights, when it gets to red, you need to finish up your comment. Because we want to be fair to everyone, and depending how many people want to comment, we want to give everybody a chance. And also that during the comments that council members listen and note the comments, but do not engage in conversation during the matters to be presented by the public or the public hearings, and staff will address those comments and questions in a timely manner. And I think that information is also back there by the sign-up sheet. As if somebody does want to make a comment and they can't come in person for whatever reason, they can contact the clerk, Mr. Joey Lamey, 276-645-7333, or find his email on the website and have some comments that they can have read during the public hearings, public comments. Also, tonight we have a call meeting. We have another one on Thursday, April the 8th, for a public hearing, and then tax rate resolution. And then we'll have the public hearing for our appropriation at the end of the month at a regularly scheduled meeting on April 27th. So just make people aware of that as we go forward. And with that, I'll move to the first and only item on the agenda, the presentation of the fiscal year 2022 budget.
Good afternoon, Council. Tonight is the fiscal year 22 budget presentation. And as we move into this budget presentation, we're going to have some highlights over the past year, some of the lowlights, some of the challenges we faced, things that you will not see in the budget, and things that are in the budget. So with no further ado, let's start with the 2021 highlights. First thing, I think that's the first and foremost thing that we have to talk about, because we're going to be dealing with it for at least the foreseeable future, is the impact of COVID-19. As you recall this time last year, we were in the throes of a pandemic. Things were locked down. Businesses weren't operating. People weren't going to work. It was a whole different world for us. The United States nor the world had ever experienced anything such as COVID-19 since 1918, when the Spanish flu took over the world in 1918 and 1919. So the city had some significant impacts from COVID-19. Due to COVID-19, we saw our restaurant meals tax decrease significantly. We saw our lodging tax decrease significantly. On the flip side of that, there were some good things. We saw our local sales and use tax increase. which I don't think any of us had planned for. We didn't anticipate that, but it did happen. And over the past year, we've seen the mills tax come back up. We've seen lodging tax increase, but at the same time, it's not where it was pre-COVID-19. We're still short, probably to the tune of $1.5 million, because people are not able to go out and eat like they used to, and they're not traveling like they're used to. However, we've seen over the past couple of 3 weeks, people are traveling more, and I think as we move into the summertime, we'll see that travel number continue to increase, people eating out more, and as more and more people get vaccinated, I think we'll see some restrictions loosened to allow restaurants to house more people. I think in general, people have a pent-up anxiety. They want to be out. They want to be with their friends and families again, doing things that they were doing prior to COVID-19. So hopefully, over this next fiscal year, we'll return to some sense of normalcy. However, we cannot forget that COVID-19 is a virus. We don't control it. It somewhat controls what we do. But if we do the right things financially, we'll be able to get through it just as we did this past year. It's just going to take some time and discipline to get us to where we need to be. Next, casino legislation. November 3rd, 2020 is when the city had an opportunity to make history in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that we did by a 2-to-1 margin when the citizens of Bristol voted to allow Hard Rock to open a casino and resort here in the city of Bristol, Virginia. This project really began in September of 2018. I distinctly remember where I was at. I was actually on vacation in Las Vegas when this story broke. I think David McGee called me and asked me, is there really going to be a casino in Bristol? So we quickly put our heads together with the developers and decided how we were going to handle that story, and temporarily I moved the city manager's office to Las Vegas for about a week. But in the fall of 18 and the winter of 19, few trips to Richmond, talking to legislators. Everybody was a little skeptical of the idea. We know a study was commissioned. JLARC conducted a study. November 25th of 2019, that study was released. At the same time, as the study being released, Hard Rock announced that they had partnered with Jim McLaughlin and Clyde Stacy to be the operator of the casino and resort here in the city of Bristol. I think at that point, that is when the people in Bristol truly realized that this was a reality. They had an opportunity to have something here in the city of Bristol that only 278 other localities across the world have, and that's a Hard Rock in our own back door. And once again, in November, the citizens of Bristol, they overwhelmingly supported that effort, and we are now on our way to having a casino and resort here in the city of Bristol. CARES Act relief money. Once COVID-19 hit, it became evident pretty quickly to the federal legislators that there needed to be some sort of stimulus package to help people through job losses and revenue losses. So we did have the CARES Act relief that the city received. We received close to $2.9 million. And out of that $2.9 million, roughly $800,000 of it went to our school system. That allowed our school system to buy needed supplies that they had not ever budgeted for, your mask, your sanitizing equipment, air ionizers, things that just no one had ever contemplated. We also were able to give a little over $500,000 to our local businesses that applied for grants to help them through COVID-19. So we were able to help, I think, 32 businesses with that COVID-19 money that had asked for help. Next, let's talk about our restaurants here in the city of Bristol. I cannot say enough about our restaurants. They were able to quickly pivot. They had never been faced with a situation where people could not come in and eat. However, they were faced with that situation in March of 2020, and they quickly made some operational changes that allowed them to serve food either through a drive-through operation more efficiently. They quickly pivoted to carry out, and lo and behold, the people in our area, they continue to support those restaurants. And that is significant, because if they didn't continue to support those restaurants during that time of need, would those restaurants still be around today? Some of them probably would not. Others may have survived, but we would not be in the shape that we're in, seeing the restaurant mills tax increase as it has over the past year. Even with all of COVID-19 still ongoing throughout this past year, we never lost focus that we had to develop Bristol economically. We continue to work with Interstate and Texas Roadhouse to make sure that Texas Roadhouse came to the city of Bristol. The first time I met with Texas Roadhouse, met with a representative in May of 2019, and we continue to work that over the past 2 years to give them a home here in Bristol. Eventually, they said now's the time. Even in the middle of a pandemic, they see what's happening in Bristol, and they chose to make the Falls home. I think they've already started moving some dirt up at Lot 12, and they hope to be open later this fall. Even Planet Fitness of all businesses to open during the middle of a pandemic, when people are told don't be together, don't be breathing the same air, they opened, they're thriving. I drove up through there today at lunchtime. The parking lot was full. So, my hat's off to Planet Fitness, taking that leap of faith, even though we're in the midst of a global pandemic. Firestone Complete Auto Care. Walls are up, concrete's poured. They're on the verge of opening. I met with them May of 2019 as well, and we cultivated that relationship over the past 2 years to get them moving. We actually transferred the property to them in September of 20, I think, and now they're getting ready to open those doors. I'll talk about the next one in just a second, but Michael Waltrip Brewing. We can all remember in the fall of 2019 having the discussions about Studio Brew closing their doors and how the city was going to handle that. We had 2 local businessmen who loved the city of Bristol, and they wanted to make sure that they were helping Bristol, Virginia as much as they could. They took a leap of faith, didn't know what they were going to do with the Studio Brew building at that time, but they knew they wanted to do something. And those 2 gentlemen, Alan Hurley and Jim Bunn, they've worked magic working with Michael Waltrip Brewing Company to get them here and get those doors open. We anticipate they'll be open sometime between June and mid-July, just waiting on licensing from the ABC board. Finally, S&P upgraded the city to an A+ credit rating in September. That was done during the midst of a global pandemic. And if I recall on one of the phone calls that I had, it may have been with the financial advisors, they said, this is unheard of. And it goes strictly to what this council has done over the past 4 years and what the management team and what the department heads have done to make sure that we abide by our financial policies, we take the finances of the city seriously, and we do everything that we possibly can to keep the city in good financial shape. And that upgrade goes to everyone, hats off to everyone involved, because it couldn't have been done without the team effort. Let's move on to my budget objectives as we move through this next fiscal year. First and foremost, as a city, we have to maintain essential services. That's your public safety, that's your public works, and that is also your solid waste disposal fund. We have to continue to do those things as a city. It's what people expect of us, and that's why people pay their taxes. We have to continue to fund essential line items. Last year, at this time, when I presented the budget, many of the line items in the budget were zeroed out, simply because there was no need to put travel funds in travel line items. People weren't traveling. Educational pieces, it just wasn't happening over the past year. But these are some of the essential line items that have to be funded in order to make sure our employees stay up to date in their jobs and certified for their certain jobs. Next, we have to continue to foster pride among city employees. City employees are our number one asset. They are the faces of the city. They are the ones interacting with our citizens. They represent you out in public. And if employees feel valued, they're happy to come to work. And that's what we want. We want happy employees to come here and be here and represent us all with pride when they're out shaking hands and doing the things that we expect them to do as employees of the city of Bristol. Next, we have to address capital needs. Unfortunately, this is also one of our challenges. Due to the fact that we've had a pandemic, our budget isn't exactly where we all want it to be, but we have to always keep in mind there's capital needs here in the city that we have to address and make sure we take care of those things, because what we do not want to do is make the sins of the past and push things off. We have to deal with these issues as they come up, address them. We may not be able to address them the way we'd like to, but we have to address those needs as we move forward. And finally, we have to fund the public school system. We have roughly 2,000 kids in our public school system, and it's very important that we give them an opportunity to learn, a safe place to learn, to give them the best chance to be productive members of society as they graduate from high school and move on to careers and colleges, and hopefully give them the foundation at some point to come back to the city of Bristol and bring their family here too. So what are those budget challenges? I've mentioned it before, COVID-19 revenue. We still have not recovered. I know there's been some great news articles in our local paper and in the video press about how the city of Bristol has handled COVID-19. We have handled COVID-19 because we have been very cautious with the way we spend. We've also were cautious last year in estimating our revenues. Fortunately, the revenues that we estimated last year were below our actuals, so we're doing a little bit better. But once again, I need to remind everyone that we are not where we were at as we moved prior to COVID-19. We also have increasing debt payments that we have to be cognizant of. With the help of the CFO, she has mapped out a path for us to be able to handle those debt payments as we move forward over the next 6 or 7 fiscal years. There's a path there. We have to be cognizant of our financial policies. Always follow those policies so that we do not come in conflict with how we need to deal with this debt payments as they move forward. Once again, our revenue growth has been modest. We are not blowing it out of the water with our revenue growth, but it is growing, and it's something we're going to have to be patient for, and as COVID-19 continues to move, hopefully go away, that revenue growth will increase. Next, inmate housing. Just about every council meeting you see a purchase requisition from our sheriff's department dealing with inmate housing. Those purchase recs range anywhere from $60,000 to $110,000 a month. It's a huge challenge for the city of Bristol, and it's something that we'll have to deal with here in the very near future. Next, school funding. Just as I mentioned, as we talk about school funding, and we'll talk about it here a little bit later, we have to be cognizant of the fact there's also a state requirement that we do what's called required local effort. And when I talk about required local effort and what we are providing to the schools, we have to make sure that there's enough flexibility for the school system that they're not falling below that required local effort number. And then finally, fund citywide maintenance. Once again, we have to maintain our equipment, we have to maintain our buildings in order to make that stuff last as long as possible so that we do not have to go out and go back to where we were years ago, leasing vehicles and leasing other types of equipment that we could easily purchase if we properly plan. So let's talk about what's not in the budget. One, new employee positions that were requested by department heads. The treasurer requested their part-time employee go to full-time. Finance requested an assistant payroll clerk. IT requested a network administrator. The police requested a major position. The sheriff requested 3 deputies and a cook. Streets and engineering requested 2 laborer positions and a city engineer, an additional city engineer. Fleet maintenance requested a mechanic. Maintenance of buildings requested a custodian. We also have a request for the community development director from me, an economic development bookkeeper for the IDA, and also an IDA attorney. So that's 15 and a half positions that were requested that's not in the budget this upcoming year. Also, let's look at the COVID-19 full-time employees that were eliminated last year that have yet to be filled. We have the IT clerical staff, we have 1 police officer, a police records clerk, a police receptionist, a firefighter, a part-time animal shelter worker, the programming senior center supervisor for 6.5 positions that have yet to be filled due to the cuts from COVID-19. What else is not in the budget? This is department needs. A school capital request of $2 million, a city attorney of approximately $150,000, capital funding for jail, plumbing issues, $160,000, HVAC issues with the jail of close to $240,000, and fleet rotation we reduced by 5 vehicles of $300,000. You also see there's just going to be a modest increase of the tourism promotion. At this time, BCM was funded at $1,750. Believe in Bristol was funded at $7,500 this past year, and the CVB was funded at $50,000. In this budget cycle, we have increased the BCM to $7,500 to put them in line with the Believe in Bristol. I know throughout the past year, we have talked about setting a percentage of what the hotels tax, lodging tax, how much of that should go to these outside agencies. With the funding that's in the current budget that I'm presenting tonight, 7% of our lodging tax is going to tourism promotion. So, let's talk about what's getting ready to happen as we move into this recommended budget. You will see things in this budget that were not in last year's budget. However, I believe that they are essential functions that we have to provide and essential services that we have to provide moving forward. These are things such as I mentioned previously, education, training, rising fuel costs that we're seeing. What you're going to see tonight is not materially different than what you saw this time last spring. There is an increase in our budget. There are some revenue offsets for that increase. However, there are things that we just have to have in order to operate as a city. So the general fund budget for this upcoming fiscal year is $54.8 million. CDBG block grants, $350,000. The solid waste disposal fund is $6.4 million. Local funded capital projects of $172,000. State and federal funded capital projects of $6.5 million. The Commonwealth Attorney's Federal Revenue Sharing Fund of $84,600. Transit Fund of $540,709. The Asset Forfeiture Fund of $357,925. That's a total city budget of $69.3 million. School budgets of $41.2 million for an appropriation ordinance of $110.5 million. General fund revenues, where do they come from? $35.1 million is your local sources of revenues. $15.6 million is from the Commonwealth, and $4 million is from the federal government. And this is showing the increase from the original budget from fiscal year 21. Your local revenues have increased by a little over $1 million. Your state revenue has increased by $1.1 million. Your federal revenue by $866,000 for a total increase of a little over $3 million. So how do we get there? Your local revenue increased the primary changes. You had a decrease in your beginning fund balance. Roughly $200,000 of that was carryover for the school system, and then there was a previous debt refinance savings as well. We have an increase in the real property taxes of $336,748. This is significant because Thursday night we are going to pass the tax rate resolution. This budget is based on $1.12 for the real property tax. It's important to note that we have a lower tax rate than what we have had in the past. Previously, the tax rate was $1.17. Each individual's real property taxes will be dependent on what their assessment did. Some assessments may have stayed the same, some may have went down, some may have went up. But the important thing to note is the City of Bristol, we recognize that we have a higher tax rate, and we reduce that tax rate by a nickel. Other local taxes increased by $1.6 million. Our sales tax increase of $520,000, and a mills tax increase of $1 million. Our state revenue increase, the primary changes there, you had compensation board increases of $201,000. Law enforcement 599 funds, street and highway maintenance of $178,000, your state sales tax at the DRI $143,000, state sales tax tourism of $60,000, and the Next Gen 911 grant of $314,000. The federal revenue increase, you have other federal funds, is the ARPA funds of $450,000, the EPA grant of $100,000, and the COPS grant of $182,320. So how does the general fund spend their money? 31% is to public safety, 16.3% is to health, welfare, and social services, education is 12.4%, public works 10.7%, debt 7.7%, government administration 5.5%, parks and rec 4.9%, transfers 4.62%, judicial administration 3.5%, community development 1.6%, and non-departmental 1.62%. General fund expenditures, total increase of a little over $3 million from the original 2021 budget. There is a 5% salary increase here for all city employees of $617,000. As we went through the budget cycle this past year, we were looking at salary increases of anywhere from 2.5% to 3.5%. We were following what was going on in the Virginia General Assembly, watching what those salary increases were going to be statewide and how that was going to affect constitutional offices, teachers, and social services. At the last minute, the Senate proposed a 5% increase, and that was passed by the House and signed by the governor. So what you have here is a 5% salary increase for city employees. That is to keep things on par with our other employees who are considered local employees. The benefits on that increase are $184,000, a health insurance increase of almost $54,000. Due to council action in fiscal year 21, there were several positions that were restored that were not in the original budget. That's $200,000. There are software needs with IT of $164,000. The majority of that is either public safety or human resources related software. The electoral board increase of $22,000, and that is for state mandated voting equipment and polling equipment that is required to have. The police department is replacing 55 tasers of $73,000. The Next Gen 911 grant of $314,000. There's an offsetting revenue for that as well. The fire department has maintenance of machinery and equipment of $29,000. Inmate housing increased $200,000 from $1 million last year to $1.2 million this year. Inmate medical has increased by $30,000. The maintenance of building and property is $52,500. Streets and engineering contract labor increased by $23,000. You're going to see that throughout the budget, each and one of those line items for contract labor, and that is due to the fact that the minimum wage increases to $11 an hour on January 1 of 2022, so we have to go ahead and budget for that increase as we move forward. Solid waste tipping fees increased by $50,000, and that's because what it's costing the city to tip our waste. Local health department increased by $22,300. Department of Social Services increased by $130,000. The schools will be getting an additional $200,000. They requested an additional $350,000, but it's $200,000 is what we've allocated for them. Public library is $32,500. Part of that $32,500 will be to offset the raises that the public library employees will get, and some of that money, roughly, the remaining amount, will go to the Jones Creativity Center at the library. The community development, $135,000 increase. However, there are grants that offset that expenditure increase. A contingency fund for the city manager of $35,281 increase. Debt service of $474,000, which is an increase, and fuel increase of $78,360. Employees that are in this year's budget, there are 4 positions that are funded by the COPS grant for the police department. There are 4 part-time positions for contract services for the sheriff's department. Due to insurance purposes, the temporary agency now will no longer allow the sheriff's department employees to go through them for insurance purposes. They have to be part of the city now. They are part-time employees. That's a total of 6 positions, full-time positions. COVID-19 full-time employees that were restored that we previously talked about was purchasing, Parks and Rec programming, economic development, code compliance, for a total of 3.17 employees. So your total full-time employee increase for fiscal year 22 is 9.17 positions. Falls funding. So this is very important. So all this is phase 2 and 3 of the falls. Real property tax increase of $268,000 at the falls. I'm sorry, that's not an increase. That's the actual budgeted amount. Personal property of $17,650. Local sales and use tax of $126,000. Restaurant mills tax of $155,000. Business license of $32,500. State sales tax of $175,000. Total revenue source of $774,000. The debt associated with the falls is a little over $3 million. We have a revenue sharing with Washington County, so there is a budgeted deficit of $2.6 million. Financial policy ratios. These are in the budget book. Council requested these to be placed in the budget book several years ago through our financial policy. So let's just talk about how we are doing in regards to those policies. General obligation debt as a percentage of assessed value, our policy goal is 5%. In fiscal year 18, we are at 9.32%. Fiscal year 19, a little over 9%. Fiscal year 20, 8.85%. Fiscal year 21, 8.88%. Fiscal year 22 is projected at 7.84%. It's also important to note that 7.84% is based on the higher assessed value of the property within the city of Bristol, Virginia now. Debt as a percentage of operating expenditures per fund, your general obligation fund, we had a policy goal of 8%. Fiscal year 18, actual 5.7. Fiscal year 19, 6.18. Fiscal year 20, 9.48. Fiscal year 21, 9.27. Fiscal year 22, we're projecting 9.17. Our solid waste disposal fund, 8% policy goal. As we all know and we've discussed numerous times, 1/3 of the solid waste disposal fund budget is debt related. So 33.91% in fiscal year 18, fiscal year 19, 32.17, fiscal year 20, 31.5, fiscal year 21, we're projecting 37%, and fiscal year 22, based on the budget, 30.8%. The unassigned fund balance, our policy goal is 18% of our general operating fund. Fiscal year 18, we were at 24.3%, 19, 27.46, 20, 26.63, projected for fiscal year 21, 24.04%, and projected for this upcoming fiscal year, 24%. Solid waste disposal fund. I think it's important to note, and I'll say this twice, there is no rate increase on the solid waste disposal fund for residential customers. Once again, no rate increase. It's at $33, just as it has been for the past couple of years for that rate. Disposal revenue is an increase of $712,000. There was a collection revenue decrease of $38,274, non-operating revenue decrease of $81,474, total fund increase of $592,000. So what's the significant expenditure increases? A 5% salary increase for the solid waste disposal fund of a little over $40,000. Benefits on that increase of $12,810. Leases for the equipment of $88,608. The landfill liner accrual of $498,000. Leases for equipment in the collections division of $62,000. And landfill post-closure care of $53,490. And a general fund transfer of $113,253. Locally funded capital projects, fleet rotation for vehicles for police, $142,000. Fire, the personal protective equipment of $30,000. Total local funded capital projects of $172,000. State and federal funded capital projects. As we move through this, it's important to note, out of these capital projects, only $40,116 is from local funds. State funds is $1.3 million. Federal is $5.1 million, a total of $6.5 million. So we have the Lee Highway Exit 5 Phase 1B project. Roughly $27,000 is funded from the general fund. $1.2 million is funded by the state, and $2.5 million is funded by the federal government, a total project cost in fiscal year 22 of $3.8 million. Goodson Street Bridge replacement, federally funded at $370,000. The Piedmont Avenue and State Street pedestrian signal is funded by state and federal revenues of $74,000 by the state and $69,000 by the feds, of a $144,000 project. Paulina Drive and the Bonham Road sidewalk, $13,166 is funded from local funds. $761,000 is funded by federal government. Then the remaining projects are all federally funded. You have the Euclid Bob Morrison signal of $395,000. Martin Luther King Bridge rehabilitation of $170,000. Fairview Street Bridge rehabilitation, $238,000. Lee Highway Old Airport Road intersection of $150,000. Oak Street Bridge rehabilitation of $470,000. Once again, total projects funded is a total of $6.5 million. So what's next? Thursday night, we have the tax rate resolution. On April the 18th, you'll see the advertisement for the public hearing appropriation ordinance for the fiscal year 22 budget. On the second meeting in April, April 27th, we will have the public hearing for the appropriation ordinance. On May the 11th, the first reading of the budget ordinance, and May the 25th, the second reading of the budget ordinance. So this concludes the presentation. I'll also note that I know there's probably a lot of questions each one of you all have. You have copies of the budget book in front of you. All of us are scheduled to meet in 2-on-2s beginning tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And we will go through each line item individually with each one of you all over the next 2 days. But I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. It may be best to discuss some of the specifics up in the conference room. However, if we can talk about some of those things here tonight in broad terms, I'll be more than willing to do that as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Eads. So, any comments or questions?
Well, it either means a 5-0 vote or an 0-5 vote. I don't know what it means. But.
Well, no, it means there's a lot of material for us to sift through. And I just want to say I appreciate the hard work that you and Ms. Spradlin and all the department heads have put into getting it to this point to where you can present a budget that meets city's needs and does so in a balanced and structurally balanced way. So I appreciate that, and unless anybody has any questions, we have a lot of reading to do, a lot of thinking about what's in here, and as you point out, you know, there's opportunities to hear from the public. My only question right now, and I think I would normally ask this as well, when will you post this document on the website?
It's posted now.
It's available now? Okay.
It's on the website now.
All right.
Just for planning purposes, I like to look at big increases, big decreases, big swings. So I noticed, like Thursday, how we came up with the increases in revenue side of sales, and meals tax, and what the basis for that. I think the basis of the increases in some of the big items, like the inmate stuff, or a little more detail on those projections, not just this year, but going forward. I think I heard tourism, all the outside agencies was held to last year.
The only thing that increased was BCM. They had been previously funded at $1,750. I increased them to $7,500 to put them on the same level as Believe in Bristol.
City attorney makes a big report today. I think we entertained for that one position. That's a big job, right? So we talk about that from my perspective. Overall, I mean, on the surface, I kind of like what I saw, honestly. I think it looks good. It was surprisingly conservative, more conservative than others want to do, so I like what I saw. I think the trends look good from the standpoint of the policy statements, and we look at all the trends. You know, some are not going down as fast as they were going up, but overall, the trends are really just in the right direction. I think it's good. I think we wanted to talk about that a little bit, make sure we have a plan to keep those trends. Some of them are close to where they can be, and some of them were a little bit away away, right? But that was, I guess the real estate tax is like my first. There's a bigness in me. I think what all the community needs to hear that there's some tax relief on the horizon. So we need to make sure that's real. Assessments are up and that kind of stuff. So we can explain the real number for folks.
I can answer one of those questions generally so the public can hear. The local sales and use tax, meals tax, lodging tax, those are all based on annualized actuals that we're seeing as they come through. So I don't feel like that we are overestimating those revenues or underestimating those revenues. I think based on what we're seeing in the travel and the trends of traveling and restaurants, these numbers I'm hoping will be a little bit low this time next year. I hope we've projected these a little bit low. These are annualized actuals from what we're seeing.
Well, let me talk about it when how low
Right.
the meals and the lodge would go, and I think we are properly or overlooking that, so we thought it right a lot more than it actually did, but the city actually sustained the revenue base as well, so that was, it could be a lot worse, that was good news.
Well, I'm going to echo a lot of what Mr. Mumpire just said. I think on the surface, I think it looks good. There's nothing that stood out and really jumped out at you that, might be an issue or possibly could be. But I want to just make a comment that at some point in time, this city has got to put an attorney back in position. A couple of years back, we made drastic changes, and we made some hard choices. And to cut, shift, move, and adjust, we decided to hire Mr. Eads as both. I felt last year it was the time to put the city attorney back in position. We are going to have to do this sooner or later, and I think sooner is better than later. We're talking $150,000 plus the benefits, unless we contract an attorney out, and that's possible. But we need to talk about replacing the city attorney position. Not that Mr. Eads can't handle it. He's done a great job for the past several years now, juggling both. But life happens. And if something was to happen, God forbid, we lose a city manager and a city attorney at the same time. And we need to do a better job protecting the dynamics of this city, because anything can happen. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And I feel like this is the year we really need to have that serious discussion on filling that position. We're not talking a whole lot of money here. We're not talking a whole lot of money. So I would like for this council to consider that and fill that position. And I'm not one that's going to stand up here and advocate for positions. But this is a critical position, and this is the year we need to make this happen.
So I'll say very briefly, because I know we're going to meet on Thursday, and I've got a lot of reading to do between now and then, but one thing that stuck out to me that I'll say thank you for is no increase on residential collection rates for trash. I know that obviously we're going to have to do a $113,000 transfer from the general fund, but we're still, even though I'm seeing light at the end of the tunnel as far as COVID, we're still in this, and there's still people who have had lost revenue and lost jobs, and I think it's the right thing to do to not raise that rate on them at this point. So I'll say thank you for that, and thank you for the work that you all have put in, both of you, and the rest of the staff for this budget.
Good. All right. Well, like I said, I do appreciate the work, and I think as a couple of people mentioned, and you mentioned yourself, Mr. Eads, we have a little more certainty than we did last year. At least you have some historic data, but we're by no means out of the woodwork with COVID. I think that was your first point, and that should be well taken. And, we just need to tread very cautiously, and I think you have, as been remarked, as you typically do, look at this in a very cautious and conservative way, trying to not overinflate your estimates and stuff. So, I think we still have a lot of work to look at, and we'll do that. And again, I encourage public, you can find the document on the website, and you can come to any of the meetings, or particularly the public hearings. And if for some reason you can't, call the city manager's office, and you can still have your comments read into the record. So, Ms. Spradlin, you had a comment?
Mr. Hartley, can I just say one thing?
Yes.
The budget book that's in front of you all, 157 pages. I'd like to thank Cameron Phillips, the senior accountant, for working professionally and diligently as numbers kept changing and kept changing and kept changing to make sure that a professional document was available to council and members of the public. Thank you. That's just what I wanted to say.
I know. Well, yes, I appreciate that.
We can eliminate it. Do we need to Photoshop it?
All right.
All right.
Well,
Thank y'all.
All right. Nothing else being said, we stand adjourned.